join me in welcoming back to the North Country, Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you very much for the terrific introduction. I appreciate it. I am so glad you all are here today. This is what democracy looks like in movies, right? It's gorgeous, it's engaged, it's informed. You know, I know there are a lot of things you could be doing on a beautiful afternoon like this, but you came here. And you came here because you understand. This is a moment of great peril for our country, a moment of great danger. Yeah. And what happens in 2020 won't just determine the direction of our country for the next 4 years or the next 8 years. This is going to be the direction of our country for generations to come. And a big part of the decision made in 2020 is going to start right here in New Hampshire. So thank you for how you engaged. We have a government that works fabulously, works terrifically, works wonderfully for giant drug companies. It's just not working for people trying to get a prescription filled. Can I have an amen on that? We have a government that works great for people who want to invest in private prisons and private detention centers. Yeah, just not for the folks whose lives are torn apart by those institutions. We have a government that works wonderfully for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who see climate change bearing down upon us. So when you see a government that works great for those at the top, works fabulously for those who can hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers, works terrifically for the wealthy and the well-connected, and is not working so much for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple, and we need to call it out for what it is. Whatever issue brought you here today, whether it's gun safety or health care or climate change, whatever issue brought you here today, if there is a decision to be made in Washington, it has been influenced by money. It has been shaped by money. It has been rewritten just a little by the folks with money. So here's how I think of this. In fact, let me tell you a quick story around this. Back in the early 1990s, you go back and read about it, America's just beginning, in fact, the whole world is just really beginning to tumble to what's happening on climate change. We don't quite have all the language, some of the science hasn't locked in place, but that's kind of the point where people are starting to get it. All that carbon in the air and what it's going to mean long term, right? So here's the interesting part. In Washington, Democrats and Republicans are working together. It's not a partisan issue. Both parties are working together because nobody wants to be responsible when things start to get really bad, right? So then what happens? Along come the Koch brothers. I see you've heard of the Koch brothers. Along come the Koch brothers, some of the big oil companies, some of the big polluters, and they say, in effect, to each other, you know, if Congress gets serious about this climate thing, wow, that cut into our bottom line. That would really take a bite at our profits. So they've got an investment decision to make. Where are they going to invest? Now they could decide, whoa, we're going to stop investing in carbon-based fuel. Our investment going forward is going to be entirely in green. No, they don't do that. They could decide, we're going to invest heavy in cleanup. We're going to invest in the things that take carbon out of the air and out of the water. They don't do that. Instead, their investment decision is they will invest in politicians. They will invest in Washington. They will invest in the decision makers. Oh, and just to twist the knife another quarter turn, you know what one of their biggest investments was at the beginning? They will invest in bought and paid for experts to go to Washington and deny that climate change is real. Now, what's the reason for that? It's not that they don't understand the science. Oh, they understand the science. Why do they invest in those bought and paid for experts? Because they build an umbrella under which politicians can hide and say, gee, I don't know, while they continue to take money from the Koch brothers, from the oil industry, from the big polluters. You want to understand the climate crisis in America today? It's 25 years of corruption in Washington, D.C. that has brought us to this place. So what are we going to do about it? This is not a time when we can say one statute over here, 2 regulations over there, a little 10 degrees more over here. This is a moment for big structural change. We've got to change the structure of how it works. And part 1 to big structural change is attack the corruption head on. Just go right after it. Money in Washington. Now, here's the good news. I have the biggest anti-corruption bill since Watergate. There it is. Here's the bad news. We need the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. Now, you wouldn't be surprised. This thing has lots of pieces to it because money is felt in so many different ways. So let me just give you a sample out of it. Some of the pieces of this bill. Here's one of my favorites. End lobbying as we know it. Block the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. Here's one you might not have thought of. Make the United States Supreme Court follow basic rules of ethics. How about it? I could do these all evening long, so I'll just pick one more. One more. You really want to root out some corruption in this country? Make every single person who wants to run for federal office put their tax returns online. So that's part 1. Attack the corruption head on. Because when you push back against the money, when you attack the corruption, when you disrupt it, now we got a chance to make some real changes. Part 2, we need some structural change in this economy. We've got an economy right now that just keeps working better and better for the bigger and bigger, right? The giants who have taken over one field after another. Big ag, big tech, big pharma, big banking, a handful. And what do? They run over their employees. They run over their customers. They run over the communities where they're located. They exercise enormous power in Washington and around the world. So, how do you think about this? Well, part 1, we need a president with the courage to enforce the antitrust laws. I'm ready. But we need more when you think about structural change. Here's what we need. We need someone who can constantly push back against it. We need more power in the hands of workers. That means make it easier to join a union and give unions more power when they negotiate. Unions built America's middle class. Unions will rebuild America's middle class. So that's That's one way. You change structure in the economy. Here's another. It's time for a wealth tax in America. So let me explain how this one would work. The idea is for anybody who's got more than $50 million in accumulated assets, your first $50 million is free and clear. I see some people saying, oh, good. But your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. And 2 cents for every dollar after that. By the way, anybody here own a home? Yeah, you've been paying a wealth tax for a very long time. It's just called a property tax. What I'm saying is different for these guys is that in their property tax, since their biggest asset is not really their real estate, let's include the real estate, the stock portfolio, the diamonds, the Rembrandt, and the yacht. Just let's include all of it, right? Okay. So the idea is that 2 cents on all that value above $50 million. And understand this, the point is not to be cranky. The point is not to say, shame on you. You know, these folks get up and they say, I had a great idea. I worked my rear end off making this happen. Good for you. You know, I had, I worked late at night. Or I inherited well. Donald Trump. However it works. But here's the point. You built a great fortune in America. Good for you. But I guarantee you built it at least in part using workers all of us help pay to educate. I guarantee you built it at least in part getting your goods to market on roads and bridges all of us help pay to build. I guarantee you built it at least in part protected by police and firefighters all of us help pay the salaries for. And we are glad to do it. We are Americans. We understand making these investments together expands opportunities. All we're saying is when you make it to the top, not just the top, but the top of the top, not just the top of the top, but the top of the top of the top, the top 1/10 of 1%. Pitch in 2 cents so everybody else gets a chance to make it in this country. And now here's the fun part. What can you do to restructure this economy with 2 cents? And here's where it starts. We can do universal child care for every baby in this country age 0 to 5. We can do universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in this country. We can raise the wages of every preschool teacher and child care worker to the professional levels they deserve. We can help level the playing field and put $50 billion into our historically black colleges and universities. We can do all of that, plus we can cancel student loan debt for 95% of the folks who are here in this area. And by the way, I want to add one more, because all of those things we do still doesn't spend all of the 2 cents. We can put in $100 billion to end this opioid crisis in America. Raise our mental health standards here in America. To take care of our brothers and sisters and neighbors. We can do all of those things and still have hundreds of billions of dollars left over.